Hey everyone, welcome to Faith Life Church. We're so excited to have you joining us this week at our second week
That's right.
of At the Movies. So
Week
you're probably
2.
kind of looking at what you're looking at now. I mean, you normally see Betsy and I a lot of times, but this is a little different this week because it is our At the Movies series that we're doing in person here at our new Albany and Powell campuses, but we aren't able to stream those to you online due to copyright. But what we can do is we can give you some really awesome exclusive content that we're super excited about. And we want to just go ahead and let you know if you missed last week's online service, you want to go back and check that out because we have back with us this week, Kevin and Stephanie Mason. And they shared just some amazing stuff last week. And it's just so awesome to see what God's done in your guys' lives.
God doesn't just get us out of our mess, He sets us on a path to our destiny.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about what God did, because once you see, and the story's not over yet.
Yeah.
So once you see the open doors that have taken place, it's just amazing. So let's get into it.
So now you guys have 3 children, right?
We do.
So yeah, so you have the 3 kids, and you've overcome all these things now. So Tate's little or whatever.
Yes.
So what starts to happen after you guys have overcome all these different things? Like, what starts to happen in your life? What was next?
People kept telling us to write a book, and it's the last thing we wanted to do.
I hate writing long emails, let alone a book. But every time we'd come into service, it would be like the Holy Spirit yelling at me, you need to share this story. You need to write this book. You need to write this book. And I fought it for probably 2 years. I didn't want to do it. And so then people started introducing us as, hey, this is Kevin and Steph. You should hear their story. They could even write a book. I'm like, oh my gosh, people are introducing us that way now. So we struggled with that idea, but we ended up
because you're
making
private
decision.
people,
We're
right?
very private people.
Yeah,
private.
even church family. Like, I remember seeing Kevin in the middle of the diagnosis and everything, but I didn't know what was going on. I just said, there's something going on. There's something up.
Finally came down to, okay, we're going to take the time to do this, to journal this. It's not our story. It's God's story. So even if nobody read it, our children would know what it took, the journey that we went through just to have them, the faith that was required just to have 3 miracle children, and how we trusted God with that journey.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you wrote the book.
We did, and that was not fun.
Well, then he wanted to market the book. He's like, well, how do we market the book?
And I thought, okay, it was the same thing coming in here. All these ideas during worship at church, Holy Spirit just, it's like downloading things, right? And so it keeps coming, share your stories, do a podcast. And so the initial thought was, hey, I could do a podcast with some of my buddies, and we could share some of our fun stories. And it comes back to, after everything fell through, I'm like, hey, Steph, would you like to be a
I was
co-host?
his 5th choice. I was his 5th choice. I have a t-shirt saying I was his 5th choice, and I will never let him live that down. 5th choice.
But it was the best choice. It was
Good
hands down
answer.
the best choice. So we found someone who did, a producer who did podcasting. And so hired him, hey, do a pilot. And so we did 8 minutes, an 8-minute story. And he put it together. We listened to it. And I'm like, okay, that wasn't terrible, right? But if that's the worst we're going to be, that's not bad. So it started with us sharing our own stories, because when we were going through all these catastrophic things that you heard last week, every single day, in addition to the word, I needed to hear something encouraging, fun, motivating, inspiring just to get through the day, right? So I thought we could provide that to other people, right? Other people that are hurting, that need something funny and clean, that it didn't matter who was in the car.
And so what did you call it?
Tell us a good story.
Tell us a good story.
So it started off with our stories from marriage and the dumb stuff I've done.
Lots of dumb stuff. Bless him.
Those are long episodes.
Those are really long episodes.
So then it turned into us meeting other people and them sharing their stories as well. From Harlem Globetrotters to now Dog the Bounty Hunter to ex-mafia hitman, right? Who has just crazy stories, to Jim Tressel and
a 9/11 survivor.
9/11 survivor and Victor Marks.
Well, let me ask you a question. So you guys have had a ton of really, really good guests. I mean, and it's Bill. I mean, you guys just it's amazing. If you haven't seen or listened to Tell Us a Good Story, you guys need to check out the podcast. But what episode are you guys on as we speak right now? Wow.
This week will be episode 182 with Rudy Rudiger, who was in the Disney movie Rudy.
Yeah.
So that dropped. That'll actually drop this week. So we've done over 180 episodes.
So how are you getting Rudy? Like how did you go from you're telling your own stories, which now you're getting all these other people to join you and tell their good stories? Like how did that build? Like how did you?
So at first I think it was like episode 5. We had our first guest, and then people were like, "Hey, my cousin can juggle. Well, you want to interview him?"
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Thank you so much.
Wait, is he available? And then it turned into we were having guests, and they would have such a fun time with us because we're not journalists,
Right.
right? We haven't been trained to do this,
Yes.
right? But God has used this uniqueness that we have to have fun conversations with people.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So these yeses are rolling over. And so now you're not having to seek out people and say, okay, we need more guests. You have referrals coming in. And then you have also had some other open doors on some television shows and in some serious journalistic things. So tell us what took place there.
Well, Steph and I are very private people, right? So this is literally look at what God can do.
Yeah.
So Pastor Gary talks about how your life should be a billboard of God's kingdom and his goodness, and just say yes. Just say yes, and God will give you the grace to walk it out. It just keeps building and building. And so we've been on last year Life Today with James Robinson. We're on that.
And I'm in here locally in the Columbus area. You guys were on the cover of the Columbus Dispatch.
We
got
were,
a picture of that
yes.
we can show everybody.
Yeah.
What else? I mean,
And now they are their podcast is in the top 1.5% in the nation,
is that
World.
true?
in the world.
In the
Yeah.
world.
And then and then it turned into a national radio show. Again, we're just saying yes.
Yes.
And then we got listeners the other day, and it's like 125,000 listeners per episode
Wow.
on the radio, which again, just
So
mind-blowing.
so that's not like podcast. That's not
in
like,
addition to the podcast.
That's an addition.
Yeah.
Wow.
So again, it's what God can do. And we're blown away by the messages that we get from people. For example, we had a listener reach out and said, "Hey, we just read your book, and my father last week was diagnosed with the same exact cancer that you had, that you were diagnosed with." And she said, "We haven't heard one good story. Every story has been a fatality, like they died from it." And so she said, she's sharing this with her mom, and it was a non-believer. It was a non-believer. And to know that somehow our message got to them, and they could experience God, experience the goodness of God just through our book, that God's using it in ways that we never thought possible, right? Because when we started this, Steph's a registered nurse, I'm a CPA. The things that, CPAs, as you know, the most boring people on the planet, right? So for God to use a CPA and an accountant to start a podcast, and again, it was like, we don't need more podcasts in the world, right? There's plenty out there, but God has used this in just so many different ways that just because we said yes.
That's right. And he will continue to bring those opportunities because he has more people who need a good story. They need that spin. They need the faith building atmosphere. I think one of the greatest miracles there are is when someone can go from hopeless to hopeful. And I think you guys do that week in and week out. So that's just incredible.
Well, one thing that hit home with us as we're going through this were the stories that we see here each week at Faith Life. So Aaron Ward, Judd Ayers, Pastor Amy, those stories were so incredibly inspirational to us. And I remember, and then we mentioned this last week, but I remember seeing Aaron Ward's video. And during that time was when I had just been diagnosed with cancer and had surgery, and I could barely speak. And I remember we're sitting there and I'm watching Aaron Ward and thinking, okay, God, I don't know how this story ends with this cancer diagnosis, what Steph and I are going through, but I know it's going to be an amazing ending because you are good in all things. And you're going to turn this awful thing that we're experiencing into something good. And then here we are today, actually sharing the story of how this worked. And so just amazing, the goodness of God.
Another yes. We're
Another
a part
yes.
of another yes. That's awesome.